The Gunner, a spy, a torturer? Okay, so in a recent SBS, Oda revealed some absolutely crazy crew roles that were held by some of Roger's crewmates. And since we're all still waiting for more Straw Hats to join, what if Luffy actually decided to follow properly in Roger's footsteps and fill all of those roles in his own crew? I guess what I'm asking is, what characters from One Piece would actually be the perfect fit for these jobs on the Straw Hat crew, and how likely is it that they'll join? And I want to start with the Roger crewmate whose job really made everyone, including me, go, what? Because it was a torturer. And sure, the torturer can also be translated as the interrogator, but it's pretty clear what those advanced interrogation tactics are actually all about. And man, I guess I never knew that Millet Pine had that dog in him like that? Well, a potential wannabe crewmate that could be a natural fit for this role is Bartolomeo, I think. This man would do absolutely anything for Luffy-senpai, including casually breaking the Geneva Conventions on a Tuesday morning after breakfast. The only problem is that the man may very likely be dead, and he's already kind of in the Grand Fleet, so how about a more interesting alternative? And I want to go with my personal #1 candidate here for Straw Hat anyways, Loki. I would argue that his stocks as a potential new crew member are through the roof right now, but if he actually joins up, they're gonna need to put my man to work somehow, and something tells me that this sadistic guy would just love to dish out some torture here and there. The only real risk I would say is that Loki, not knowing his own crazy strength, could accidentally do a little bit more murdering than interrogating, but you know, maybe it works. Moving on though, the second crew position that Roger had that Luffy is still missing is that of the tactical officer. Oh, like the sound of that. And it was filled by Moon Isaac Jr., and based on that title, this position is all about devising battle strategies, especially when it came to large-scale battles that we do know the Roger Pirates absolutely participated in, like the Battle of Ad War, where Roger went head-to-head with the army of Shiki the Golden Lion. And I will say, as the Grand Fleet is gonna get pulled into the final war, the Straw Hats will absolutely need someone on their side to properly place all the chess pieces on the board. Now, you could make the argument that there are already some resident Straw Hats with very smart tactical minds. We have Sanji, for example, but he's a little bit busy between all the cooking, picking, and simping. But if we're thinking about a new crew member, Luffy's brother from another big mother, Katakuri, comes to mind, since he's always thinking a few steps ahead. And to be honest, I really just want this Mochi man to come back into the fold and join the crew, but I don't think that 5 seconds in the future is the kind of, you know, long-term strategic planning that we're talking about here. And come on, let's just be real here. Trafalgar D. Waterlaw is gonna be looking for some new employment very soon now that his entire crew, besides Bipple, has been wiped out completely by Blackbeard. And really, who better to join his old longtime ally Luffy, whose crew he accompanied all the way from Punk Hazard all the way to Wano. And Law is easily one of the best long-term strategists in all of One Piece, and probably one of the smartest characters overall. I love him, most of the fans love him, and Chopper's got the medical field pretty well covered, so Law can just switch over comfortably to the Straw Hat Fleet's tactical officer. The only problem is going to be here getting Luffy to ever follow any plan properly. Ever. And actually, a whole bunch of Roger's crew positions weirdly seem to deal with the term intelligence. I mean, there is an interrogator, a scholar, an information broker, an intelligence officer, and while Luffy's just out there totally vibing, Roger surprisingly very clearly had information gathering as a top priority as he searched for the poneglyphs and, you know, tried to find Laugh Tale. And so as much as the former king of the pirates and the future one here are very similar, obviously, this seems to be an area where they're totally different so far. I would argue Luffy's pretty content not knowing, well, anything really. But if Luffy did suddenly take a real interest in learning about the truth of the world, or, you know, the other Straw Hats needed to convince him, which potential new crewmates could help him do that? Who would he trust to be the scholar of his crew, for instance? And let's be real, a scholar and an archaeologist are not that different, at least when we're talking about what's going on in One Piece. I mean, Roger's scholar was this dude here named Rowing, and I'm pretty sure that archaeology falls under the scholarly umbrella. Maybe, I think. But since it's technically a different job title, let's see who would be a candidate for the Straw Hats resident academic besides, you know, my girl Robin. Come on, is it even a contest? If it's not gonna be Robin, it's gotta be Dr. Vegapunk, the smartest person in the One Piece world, canonically. Specifically, I would like to go still with Lilith. You know, the satellite baddie who traveled with the Straw Hats to Elbaf and is in the middle of setting up a new lab there. And honestly, already by the time that we left Elbaf, but the latest as soon as she stepped out of that giant robot thing, she joined the ranks of my potential Straw Hat candidates. So even if you think it's unlikely, if anyone should get the scholar spot in the crew, it would be Lilith here. It turns out that hitting the books isn't the only way to get information in the One Piece world, nor is it the most interesting. Because then we also have Roger's very interesting position of Informant held by Ario here. By the way, dare I say, the second best mustache wearer in the entire crew. Now, the way that I understand it, he's an information broker with plenty of ties to the One Piece underworld, trading info with some absolutely shady sources from the government, other crews, and so on and so forth, and kind of keeping his thumb on the pulse of the One Piece worlds. And thanks to Caesar's message on Punk Hazard, we've actually gotten a sneak peek of tons of underworld brokers who have potential in this area. Peckham's honestly would be a really fun option because he's probably looking for new employment after Big Mom went the way of, you know, the dinosaurs. But really, Peckham's? I mean, I can't in my good conscience also bring the lion turtle onto the Thousand Sunny. He just does not have massive Straw Hat vibes, but what about the world's greatest source of info instead? That's right, we're talking about big news Morgans. Maybe Vivi will learn a thing or two while laying low with him and she can rejoin the crew with this very job. Though honestly, I have a much better spot in mind for Vivi, which leaves me with one more idea. And so I'm gonna give my heart, the info broker spot in the crew to none other than Vinsmoke Reiju. I don't know, maybe Sanji can call in a favor from his one good sibling to bring Poison Pink over into the crew. Because let's be real, with all of the Germa 66 ties to the world government and the underworld, she would have tons of ways to access a ton of confidential information. Don't forget, the Germa kingdom has been invited to the Reverie, but also do tons of shady deals with other kingdoms and pirates all across the world, selling their military might to the highest bidders and stuff like that, so these connections would be kind of perfect. But then again, I don't know, I might just be biased here and want to look at Reiju a little bit more. In case you're curious, by the way, the Rogers intelligence officer was Spencer, and I like to imagine that this dude felt really left out being the only dude on the crew with a regular human name. Because in a world of Jackson's Banners and Millet Pines and Blue Marines, it's kind of hard to just be Spencer. Oof. But he probably didn't have a lot of time to worry about it all because he was very busy being a super spy. And this is why I think that Spencer was secretly the perfect name all along. Because let's be real, no one would ever suspect a thing with a name like Spencer. And the SBS sadly doesn't give us a ton about what these jobs actually meant and entailed, but to me, an intelligence officer suggests that Spencer was going undercover to do some very serious espionage. Like, you know, basically Spencer-esque James Bond shenanigans, and there's already quite a few Straw Hats who are fairly good with spying. You know, with Robin's ability to spawn ice and Brook's ability to float around in his ghost form, they're great for stealth. And Sanji's just so fast, he's basically invisible, so he's always ready to pull a Mr. Prince and go undercover too. But I hear you, you want a new Straw Hat, so let's find a dedicated Straw Hat spy instead. Now, maybe not so obvious, but great candidate could be Leo, who could get a promotion from the Grand Fleet Officer to being a full crewmate. Now, you might be thinking that this is kind of a weird choice. The guy's Devil Fruit is all about sewing stuff together. What does a Stitch Fruit user have to do with infiltration? But you probably figured out that it has a lot less to do with his Devil Fruit and much more with him, you know, being a Tontada. Remember our introduction to these little guys? Zoro got straight up robbed by Wicca, and the Tontada are just well known for stealing items from the innocent Dressrosans while being completely undetectable. That's because they're so small, stealthy, and speedy that most people of Dressrosa even think that they're straight up just a myth. Now, in Leo's ties to Rebecca, he already has access to high-profile events like the Reverie, where he could go on a little bit of a side quest to eavesdrop on world leaders to get info for the Straw Hat crew. But if you don't like that one, there's actually one other pick that stands way above Leo in my opinion, and that would be the #1 homie in the universe, and no, none of Big Mom's, I'm talking about Bentham, aka Mr. 2 Bonkure. Because if anyone on this list deserves a spot alongside the Straw Hats, it's the guy who has sacrificed himself for Luffy, not once, but multiple times. And it's just like they say, if you can die, you can spy. I'm sorry. I don't know. When it comes to espionage, there are a few better fruits than the clone fruit, which straight up allows Boncré to make the perfect disguises of anyone that he touches. Let's not forget that this man fooled all of Alabasta by taking King Cobra's place. He impersonated Magellan to allow everyone to escape from jail, and so after the next big Impel Down prison break, which probably is happening with Marco and everything, I would argue let's get this legend on the Sunny stat. Now, it turns out that some of Roger's jobs surprisingly aren't about information gathering at all though. Some of them just come down to using brute force to absolutely demolish their enemies, and at the top of that list is the gunner. Now, of course, you could make an argument that Usopp's position is pretty similar to this, right? But there's a big difference, I would argue, between a sniper and a gunner. In case you're curious, a gunner's job is, to man the ship's cannons, something with a whole lot more firepower than a slingshot, I would say. And on Roger's crew, this job was held by a guy named Peter Moo, but I have two candidates who I think can go ahead and submit their resume to Luffy directly. First up, we have Capone Beige of the Fire Tank Pirates. Who better in charge of the cannons than the man who is quite literally a tank full of cannons himself? He already allied with Luffy once during the assault on Whole Cake Island, and they made a surprisingly good and surprisingly fashionable team as well. But on the other hand, since Beige is one of the very few supernova who have not had their entire crew absolutely stomped out in the New World yet, I don't think he'd have any interest in joining the Straw Hats at this point. So instead, why not look at another supernova who might be qualified in gun? Yes, we're talking about Eustace Kid, because just like Law, he just got absolutely annihilated by one of the four emperors. In fact, Shanks may very well have just one-shot him into the next life, but this is also One Piece and I haven't seen a body quite yet, so I do think it's more than likely that Kid might come crawling back to shore in Elbaf at some point, probably with some additional robot parts. And I would argue that his ship and crew probably did not survive here, so maybe he'll have to set aside his pride, realize he's not quite that guy, and just help out Luffy instead. And like him or not, you can't argue with the fact that Kid would make a pretty perfect gunner, since his electromagnetic railgun is basically the single most destructive cannon that we've seen in the story. And if he just did opt for regular cannonballs, he really wouldn't even need the cannons or gunpowder, since the last time I checked, cannonballs are made of metal. So I guess he could just straight up be garping those things at enemy ships using his Devil Fruit powers, as long as he could stop arguing with Luffy for like half a second at least. But moving on, there are actually two more Roger crew positions that weren't talked about in the SBS, but we do know what they are canonically and who held these jobs. Because Kozuki Oden was the chronicler for the Roger Pirates, officially keeping the ship's logbook that recorded their journey to Laugh Tale, which was then eventually passed down to his son Momonosuke. And then at some point to Yamato, I guess. And so for this position, I'm also not going to be entertaining any other options, because there is just one logical person that could be this, and you know exactly who I'm talking about. Yeah, Yamato herself. I'm still very salty about it, and I still try to forget it, but we really got robbed when Yamato decided to stay behind on Wano. But once she truly follows into Oden's footsteps on the Oni Child pilgrimage and rejoins the crew, Yamato will surely take Oden's spot on the crew of the next king of the pirates on the journey to Laugh Tale as the Chronicler. And the other spot that we know about, even if they're not listed in the SBS, is the role of Cabin Boy. Both Shanks and Buggy started out their pirating careers as swabbies on the Oro Jackson, and I think it totally makes sense for Luffy to also bring along a member of the next generation, to make sure that the Great Pirate Era continues long into the future. Also, fun fact, you can join the Great Pirate Era right now by heading over to my Patreon, where you can get early chapter reactions, you can get our artwork as wallpapers, and even a free weekly newsletter if you don't have any money to support us, or you just don't want to but still want something for free. Now, for Cabin Boy, there are a ton of great characters that we could look at. Turns out there are a bunch of children that Luffy has befriended and bonded with along his journey, and I kind of had my eyes on Momonosuke for a long time, but since my man is a big boy now, I don't exactly think that the new Shogun of Wano is gonna come along for the ride. But instead, there is another Wano resident, Tama, who remains a very strong candidate. With her really broken Devil Fruit and her new training under Shinobu to become a Kunoichi, she could actually hold her on the crew and she kind of has made that promise with Luffy anyways. Similarly, Colin is putting in some strong work on Elbaf right now. Not only does he himself dream of having his own pirate crew, but my man Gaban's son here just poached like half the Straw Hat crew to temporarily join the Colin pirates. That boy's name kills me every time. But after the craziness going on in Elbaf right now, I think that Colin needs to spend a few more years with mommy and daddy before he finally gets to set sail. And so if there's truly any child who should absolutely join the crew right now as a cabin boy or girl, it has gotta be Jewelry Bonnie. Yeah, a lot of supernovas in this video. Wow. Because after learning on Eckert Island that she's really just straight up a kid who's in search of her dad Kuma, and now that she's actually come along with the Straw Hats for a couple of arcs, she's kind of shot up to be on top of my list for that crew position. After all, Bonnie's been searching for Nika her entire life, and now she's finally found him in the form of Luffy, along, by the way, her absolutely broken Devil Fruit power that can turn herself into Nika, making her a huge asset to this crew, and I think that the Supernova Captain would make a very welcome addition to the Straw Hats. But the shocking thing is that there's actually one other crew position on the Roger Pirates that has not been filled on the Straw Hat crew technically yet, which is the position of the first mate. Yeah, you heard that right. And before you go commit arson in my comment section, I'm saying technically, so hear me out please. Zoro has never actually been officially referred to as the first mate. Surprisingly enough, you'd think that would have happened sometime. But if you actually go and read through the entire manga again, actually just quickly do that and I'll wait here. You done? Have you read all of it? All 1,000? Okay. Zoro's actual job on the crew is listed by Oda officially as the swordsman and sometimes as the fighter. And while Zoro clearly is the right-hand man and should have that spot, let's just for the fun of this video, do entertain a few other possibilities that could hypothetically jump into that spot from the outside. Let's be clear, there are very few characters who could ever fill these shoes. We're looking for someone with some serious leadership qualities, someone who's loyal to Luffy and the crew, and one of the few characters who could actually be this is actually a member of the Straw Hats already, but the only one without an actual job on the crew. We're talking about Nefertari di Vivi. Now, Vivi has not been on the ship for a long time. In fact, the old ship burned down in the meantime since she last was on, but that X that they all drew in their arms does really mean something. Actually, wait a second. Since I have it here anyways, might as well pull it up. Let's be real, Vivi has been bound to rejoin the crew properly as soon as the final war kicks off. She's even been sending them secret messages through the newspaper, and having now carried the responsibility of leading an entire nation, she's one of the only characters I could ever possibly think of who's a strong enough leader to take on the responsibility of a first mate now so late in the story. But if she ever does return and get a real job on the crew, I actually wouldn't put her as first mate. I'd actually give her a brand new position that even Roger didn't have: Quartermaster. Interestingly enough, we've never seen any canonical Quartermasters in One Piece before, but on real-life ships, they're like a pretty big deal. This leadership position deals with managing the ship's quarters and all the logistics that come with supplies on the ship. And the reason that I want to put Vivi in that position is that the Quartermaster is also in charge of making sure that everyone is properly doing their job and dishing out discipline if the crew is out of line. And if anyone's able to put Luffy or Usopp in their place while they're goofing off, I think that the Queen of Alabasta is the one for the job, especially if Nami's doing something else. And really the only other character I could ever possibly imagine Luffy putting first mate levels of trust in is his very own brother, Sabo, who also has the leadership skills necessary as the chief of staff of the Revolutionary Army. But really, come on Oda, give the most loyal Straw Hat the promotion that he deserves and just have Luffy officially name Zoro the first mate so we can please finally put this debate to rest. Because we all really know deep down it is Zoro. That was one of my first videos we ever made on this channel. And once Luffy hopefully actually fills all these roles, he would not only be on the level of the Roger Pirates and ready to find Laugh Tale, but just on par with one of the other most powerful pirate crews in the entire story, the Rocks Pirates. And now with Oda giving us so much more info than ever about this absolute crew of legends, you can check out this video where I break down every single member of the Rocks Pirates, what we know about them, their position, their powers, everything right here Otherwise, thank you so much to all of our beautiful patrons, and I will see you in the next video.